Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Capturing the Games, the Game Within the Game podcast, featuring me, your host, Desmond Jones, and my co-host, Juwan Stewart. Today, we also have another host in the building. He is my older brother, Mark Jones. But also remind the audience and listeners out there that Capturing the Game is sponsored by Capture Sports Agency, where CEO and founder is Chantel Smith-Jones. Now that we got the introductions out the way, we'll go ahead and get into the main portion of Capturing the Game. It is today we have a special guest. He is a legend in the game. He will go down as one of the greatest to ever do it. His name is Mr. Leigh Steinberg. Leigh, how are you doing today?
I'm just peachy. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm definitely honored and blessed to be able to have a portion of your time with your busy schedule and everything that's going on. But yeah, definitely a legend. Definitely love and respect all the work that you do. But can you go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Um, well, I was born in Los Angeles, went up to school at Cal Berkeley, and I was a dorm counselor in an undergraduate dormitory, working my way through law school. And they put the freshman football team into the dorm, and one of the students was the quarterback named Steve Bartkowski. And in 1975, he became the very first player selected in the NFL draft. And I traveled the world for a while. When I came back, he asked me to represent him. So there I was, brimming with legal experience, never having practiced before. And I had the first pick in the first round of the draft, and we got the largest rookie contract in NFL history. And we flew to Atlanta to sign the contract, and I was stunned by the fact that Klieg lights were flashing in the sky like for a movie premiere. A huge crowd was pressed up against the police line. The first thing we heard was, "We interrupt the evening news to bring you a special bulletin. Steve Bartkowski and Leigh Steinberg have just arrived at the Atlanta airport." And I really saw then the idol worship and veneration in athletes were held in communities across the country, how they were the movie stars and celebrities. And I thought that if my dad had two core values he raised us with, one was treasure relationships, especially family. And the second was try to make a meaningful difference in the world and help people who couldn't help themselves. And so I saw that athletes could be role models and they could go back and retrace their roots to the high school community, where about 120 of our clients have either endowed a scholarship fund or work for a church or Boys and Girls Club. And then at the collegiate level, to repay their scholarship and stay close to those alums. So Edgar and James at the University of Miami, or Troy Aikman at UCLA, or Steve Young or Warren Moon, they all repaid their scholarship. And then at the pro level, we challenged athletes to find some cause in their life that they would like to tackle, and then put together a charitable foundation with the leading business figures, political figures, and community leaders on an advisory board to implement the program. So that's like the running back work done in a program we did called Homes for the Holidays, where he's put 175 single mothers and their families into the first home they'll ever own by making the down payment and moving them in. So it's athletes changing lives. It's when I represented the boxer Lennox Lewis, we had him cut a public service announcement that said, "Real men don't hit women." And that could do more to motivate rebellious adolescents about domestic violence than 1,000 authority figures ever could. So that was 46 years ago. And we've had a big football practice, represented 64 first round draft picks. I've done the first pick in the first round 8 different years. In baseball, had a big practice, and recently we added clients like Patrick Mahomes and Tua Tagovailoa. Jerry Jeudy was a first round draft pick. But baseball, basketball, Bach, a whole series of different sports, the U.S. team in the World Cup, Olympic athletes that came home. And it's all been with the same philosophy that we can position sports to make a positive impact in the world.
Mr. Steinberg, with that being said, one of the basic things that a lot of athletes have come out, or when they come out, when they first, they're being drafted, a lot of them, this is the first real money that they actually are getting in their hands. How does your crew handle training or teaching these athletes about financial literacy and making sure that they don't go run out of money before their next contract?
So fortunately, they have programs now on the college campuses. Many athletic departments have programs that teach financial literacy. It's also reemphasized by the Players Association, and we make sure that there's a financial planner in the life of each player who teaches them the concept of budgeting and doing a financial plan and what taxes are all about. And so they each commit to a plan. And these athletes today are well aware of the mistakes of their predecessors and really committed to going forward with that. So we end up with athletes that are financially set for the rest of their life. But part of it is by sitting with an athlete, having them explain what their value system is, what their priorities are, and then putting together a lifetime plan that starts with the path to the draft, ends hopefully with them in the Hall of Fame where we have 12 players, and then leads them into a graceful transition to second career, so that we actually have 3 former athletes that own parts of actual NFL franchises, very successful people in business and coaching and broadcast. So it's a holistic plan to make sure that they have a happy life.
So Leigh, let me ask you a question. So a player, so like I see you have one of the undrafted players, James Robinson, that plays for Jacksonville. With the situation how they did in the draft and they drafted Travis Etienne, what did you tell him, if anything, to his future maybe with Jacksonville, if that's even a question at this point?
So being able to place free agents gets easier over time because we have long-lasting relationships with the general manager, with different people and player personnel. So all those free agent deals happen either the night of the last day of the draft or the next day, but they happen quick. And you're able to get a general manager. That deal was done by Dan Saffron, but so he was able to get a general manager to tell him that he had the best chance there. And we've been successful. You wish someone would be drafted, but we have a client, Jeffrey Wilson, on the San Francisco 49ers, who's going into multiple years of a career. Because I asked John Lynch, who was the general manager, look, if this is not the best location for him, tell me. We can live with that, but tell me that you've looked at him, you've looked at your roster, and he's got a good chance to make it. So it's by having that information and not simply going off of who offers the most signing bonus.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
So Leigh, you're, again, if we're looking at a Mount Rushmore of sports agents, you have to be at the top. I don't know too many sports agents that have had a movie loosely based off them. But before we talk about that, which I'm sure my co-hosts will ask some questions about, Jerry Maguire and everything like that. But one of the things that I would like to know is, like before you've signed the Troy Aikman and you've taken us back to Markowski, what would you give, like, as far as advice to young agents? Like, who are your mentors earlier on that paved the way for you to do? I know you mentioned your father, but what other agents have helped paved your way or helped lay the foundation for you early on, and then paying it forward? Like, what would be some advice that you would give to young agents?
So remember that the field was rudimentary when I started. There was no guaranteed right of representation. So a team could hang up the phone when I started and say, we don't deal with agents, and you wouldn't represent them. So there was no established field to get advice from. The best advice I can give any young person who wants to get into agency is, first of all, we do an agent academy where we teach basic skills, how to recruit, how to negotiate a contract, how to client maintain. And you can find those by going to steinbergsports.com. And there we will train and help. But I think the basic skill that I think is most important is psychology. And the expression of that is listening. Can you draw out another human being, get below the surface, understand not their surface answers, but what they really feel in their heart are the keys for them? And can you get inside and understand their deepest anxieties and fears and the greatest hopes and dreams? And if you can bond at a deep emotional level. But people think the trick is suasion, where in many cases it's just listening at a deeper level to what is actually there with another person. If you can look at life the way that another person looks at it, if you can look at the world as a player looks at it, as a general manager looks at it, if you can see the world the way the other person sees it and understand what their needs and desires are, and craft a win-win scenario where everyone comes out with their dreams being fulfilled, you can work your way gracefully through this business.
So on top of that, so like when you get into that sphere of like business and friendships, like how do you not mix the two, but then also being able to say being a good friend and then also being a good agent to that person as well?
So these relationships develop unlike a traditional legal relationship because you're dealing with the young people. And so back in the day, someone like Warren Moon became virtually my best friend because we were two young people going through life together,
right,
and facing everything together. And I probably got as much advice from him about different aspects of the business as he got from me. And that was true with that older generation of athletes. I'm probably not going to be the best friend of someone who's 21, but I can be a mentor. And so there were close friendships throughout most of my career. And now we've got Gen Z and
TikTok.
I think I can, exactly. I think I can help them, and I can certainly relate to the parents.
So Leigh, you talked about the balance between being, the distance between being the older generation and this generation and things of that nature. Tell me how you deal, or how would you tell an agent or anyone coming into business, really, how do you deal with losing a client, and how do you, the right way of going about it versus the wrong way? Because there's always examples of both, right? And so how would you give advice regarding that? Because that's something that unfortunately happens in your line of business quite a lot. So how do you handle that? How did you handle it, and how what would you do differently if you can go back and talk to a younger Leigh.
So rarely did we ever lose clients, but we did. And part of it is the failure of, was I not listening correctly? Was I not keeping in touch with the evolution of the athlete? So a player might come into the league. We had a guy, Lance Briggs, third round draft pick. First year, he makes the Pro Bowl. So you have to be sure to keep in touch with where that athlete is now and the evolution. And also, if one client asks another, you talked to Leigh recently, and the answer is no, then you probably have a maintenance problem there. But what you're trying to do is meet with people at the end of the year by attending games and meeting with players and their families, by making sure you have one-on-one time to refresh. So it's, and if you were to ever lose a client, you have to be gracious about it, because life is long. And the fact that they've made this temporary decision doesn't mean they won't come back to you. But if you burn bridges and you're nasty and tough and resentful, there's no chance that will ever happen. And you simply don't want to have a whole lot of frayed relationships or bitter people out there. So part of it is by handling it with maturity and grace, and telling the player will always be a fan, you'll always have a place here, and best of luck to you as you move forward.
So like, have you ever had that situation where you're like, that one got away, or like that, like you could have had that person as on your staff or like as a client, and you like, man, that one, I could have helped him in a certain way, or I could have helped her, or whatever the case is. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, all the time. And it's some of the people I didn't take as clients who went on to have tremendous career, or some of the ones, I mean, who wouldn't want to represent Tiger Woods? Who wouldn't want to, who would not want to represent LeBron James?
Yeah, right.
So you can see him out there, but you have to come to the point of view, you can't represent everyone.
Mhm.
And so that's just okay to deal with.
Makes sense.
You talked about evolution, the evolution, the changing of the agent of being an agent. One of the things that have kind of came up in the headlines recently is the NIL. How has that changed your outlook on things, or has this always been something that you kind of saw coming? One of the things that I've noticed, and I was on another podcast with Desmond, we talked about this, is you don't want to be, everyone remembers, or knows Netflix, but a lot of people are forgetting what happened to Blockbuster. Everyone kind of, it's they had their chance and they didn't see forward, and now they're basically it stinks. So how do you, with the NIL, like how do you change maybe some of your practices, and where do you see the evolution of being a sports agent with dealing with the NIL?
So it changes in a fundamental way the circumstances under which you meet an athlete and need to be focused on an athlete. And it changes the chronology to much quicker and much younger. In baseball, when we did top round draftees, we were dealing with players often who came out of high school. But in football, not till they played 3 years, or the class had graduated 3 years ago, would you really become concerned, because it was when they're going to be drafted. But now it's trying to project what high school player is going to have a rapid start to his career. I think the football quarterbacks from college are probably the first big group of winners. There are women. So we signed Spencer Rattler as an NIL client, the Oklahoma quarterback. And we would have been talking to him, but we signed Malik Willis, who's a quarterback at Liberty. But I would not meet a young person. So it speeds the whole process up, because make the assumption that most marketing agents are the same people that eventually represent players. And if you miss on signing the young player as a marketing agent, you might never be able to talk to him later about representation. So it speeds it all up. I think this is long overdue. We've always had a situation on the campus where if you come from middle class or better circumstances, you live just fine on scholarship. If you come from a disadvantaged home, you may be sending part of the check home. And those players who come from disadvantaged homes don't even live as well as their non-athletic peers, and they become resentful. And remember, if you're not an athlete, you can work during the school year or summer to supplement your income. So this was long overdue. I think big winners also. If it had been a little sooner, you would have seen people competing for Olympic type female athletes who were going to go off to the Olympics, but it just happened July 1st. We've known this was coming for a while. California passed SB 206 several years ago, which said that in 2023, California athletes are going to have this right. So it put pressure on the NCAA. They also were going to start the program in January originally. So we've known for some time it was coming and had the ability to plan.
Gotcha.
So, Leigh, with this next upcoming season, with the NFL playing 17 games now, what's the ramifications that the players will have to now go through, or what some of the stuff that you may have to additionally prepare your clients for gearing up for, first time in history where we're doing a 17-game season?
Well, first of all, less time in the preseason. So, and this makes it tougher on people who weren't high draft picks or might be undrafted free agents to make teams, because how much of a chance will they actually have to play in a real game? How much chance will they have to do that? The other thing is that the season was long at 16 games. And I've been concerned about issues like concussion and head injury and trying to acquaint players of what the dangers are there. And most NFL players who are hurt within your or my definition of being injured every week, they just continue on playing. So adding another game adds more revenue, but at the same time, it increases the risk. So it's going to be interesting to see by the time we get to game 17 and the body is completely beaten up, does it add injuries?
With that being said, do you think it's odd that they've added this extra game, but they haven't added anything to like essentially to the game day rosters or expanding the rosters? Do you think that's something that might happen based off of what happens this year? Or you think from a financial standpoint that they might not, they just try to keep it the way it is because it's the way it's been?
So they did expand the practice squad from 10 to 12. So that's a couple more players, but the roster size is still 53 with 47 active. And the answer is yes, because remember that the salary cap has created a situation where you no longer have the left tackle who's a Pro Bowler backed up by someone who's a little less skilled than he is. In other words, if he's an A, you don't have a B plus backing him up because there's not enough cap room to do that. So injury is going to have a precipitous effect on the playoff drive of certain players because they simply don't have the backups tend to be aging veterans and young first couple of year players, so that you lose that talented starter, and now all of a sudden the backup is someone who's not at that level at all. And so I think it will put a disproportionate impact on injury, and this could happen earlier. You can have players go out for the season up front very quickly, and then there's not an available player to just sitting around to replace them at the same level. And even if there was, you don't have the cap room for a great player to be the replacement.
Yeah, you pretty much just described my Chicago Bears. So, but no, I greatly appreciate that. I was just wondering, that's one of the big topics that we've kicked around before, is just will we see the expansion of the rosters? Because again, you like I said, that quality, the drop off from your starter level to your backup is just
and then you may be replacing with someone when the first quarterback goes down. Many teams keep only two.
Right.
That means the second quarterback is now the starter. And who's backing him up? Well, hopefully it's somebody that was in training camp, that's on the practice squad. But if not, you're bringing in someone flat off the street who doesn't even know your playbook.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like the Denver Broncos last year.
Oh, yeah, that's tough. Yeah, look, that was a tough one. That was a tough one. And then also, too, that's like with the NBA, with the shortened offseason, the injuries were just at a super high all last season entirely. But with that, though, let's transition into our next segment, which is the rapid fire questions. So I'm going to list off some questions, Leigh. Hopefully, whatever you answer, we're just going to go back and forth with you. If that's a little game that we like to play, that's
Okay.
cool. All right. So the first question is, do you like chocolate chip or oatmeal raisin?
Oatmeal raisin.
Let's go.
Oh my gosh, man. Another oatmeal raisin person. Jeez.
Well, if they were chips, I'd want them to be milk chocolate chips, not bittersweet.
Okay, I could rock with that. I can rock with that.
Yeah, I was about to say, I've met a person I've met one of my favorite people, and then you said oatmeal raisin. Like I'm kind of hurt. All right, TV shows or movies, Leigh?
My favorite movie of all time is The Godfather.
Really? Wow.
Number one and number two. Number three didn't quite make it. And if you put number one and two together chronologically, so it starts with the Robert De Niro actor and then goes to Al Pacino. But, that's one that I love. My favorite actors are Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe.
Okay, favorite Denzel Washington movie?
Yes.
Everyone. I don't know. I like him more when he's heroic, but I got to say, Training Day was Denzel at his worst and best.
That's fair.
I'll give you that one for sure.
That's fair. So, Leigh, what's your favorite sports moment that you've either seen or witnessed?
It was probably Steve Young sitting in the shadow of Joe Montana forever, and then playing in the Super Bowl against the Chargers in Miami. And he threw 6 touchdown passes, and they slaughtered the Chargers. And Steve I got down on the field. Steve ran up and hugged me, and he said, "The monkey's off my back. The monkey's off my back." That was pretty sweet. My favorite moment was giving the presenting speech for Warren Moon at the Hall of Fame, and having the honor of doing that. And here I'd had someone who played for 23 years, who I sort of grew up with, and was the first African-American quarterback in modern history to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So he changed history.
Yes. Yes, Warren Moon's one of my favorite quarterbacks of all time, just because I grew up. I'm a little bit older than the younger two. I'm in my 40s, so I grew up watching Warren Moon. That's one of those quarterbacks that you remember that you just wish could have got a ring. Because I really wish, I felt like he did everything. I still the Buffalo Bills game that come back with yeah, Frank. Yeah, see, that's how I feel, Leigh. Like that's exactly how I feel just thinking about it. Cause I was like, I felt like that was his year to finally get over that and stick it flow.
Speaking of quarterbacks, okay, you got Tom Brady or Peyton Manning.
Oh man.
Tom Brady.
I think that's There
you go.
I think that's rather
the GOAT.
I don't think there ever was or ever will be someone quite that successful.
No.
The key to quarterback greatness is, can you take your team to and win the Super Bowl? You can take your stats, you can take all the rest of it, but ultimately that's the way we judge quarterback greatness. So for example, Troy Aikman is in the Hall of Fame. He would be 17 for 22 for 200 yards. That'd be a game, but he won 3 Super Bowls.
Yeah. All right, Leigh, I'm going to ask you this one. Barry Sanders or Walter Payton or Emmitt Smith? I'm going to throw in the third choice. You got to pick one.
Walter Payton.
Sweetness.
That is why you're my favorite agent of all time.
Sweetness.
I feel better. I feel much better now.
Walter Payton. Go back, for example, to the 1985 Super Bowl. Barry Sanders, I'm told, didn't love football all that much. He was a great player, but he retired. He didn't play very long. And Emmitt Smith was one of triplets, but Walter Payton early on had to do it by himself.
Yep. I try to tell these young whippersnappers. I do. I remember my first formative football years or football memories was the 85 Bears. Like I was like 8 and I didn't know what was going on. And I think the biggest thing, as great as that moment was for Chicago Bear history, the fact that Walter didn't get that touchdown.
That was maybe the greatest single team ever, because when you went through it player by player, they had all pro after all pro after all pro. As a matter of fact, I came back to Chicago and was a roaster at the Richard Dent roast.
Wow.
And one of the fun things is that the refrigerator, William Perry, and a couple of the players and I went out and did PR for it. But it was, Willie Galt and Dan Hampton, and there was a whole group. But that team was beyond belief. I had a quarterback, Tony Eason, as a client.
New England Patriot.
And they played the Bears. And Willie Galt went down one sideline and he threw him like an 80-yard pass, and the route was on. And so I had to console Tony Eason afterwards.
Wow. That roast that you did with Richard Dent, was that like 89 or 93? Like
No, it was only 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
These are all retired players, and I think it benefited the Better Boys Foundation.
I want to say, because that was done in Chicago, correct?
Yes.
I want to say my old radio, I used to, long time ago in the galaxy far, far away, I used to work for WSCR 670, The Score. I was an intern. So I want to say, if I'm correct, because I still keep up with a lot of those guys there, I want to say that roast was either broadcast or publicized by the radio station. So it sounded from.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we did PR at that station. I think we did a radio spot with William Perry and myself and Willie Galt and some other folks like that.
Yeah, small world. That's awesome. I know, and the stories from the 85 Bears, I remember one of my favorite memories at the Score was listening to Dan Jiggets and really Doug Lafone, and Hamp was working with Lawrence Holmes at the time. They were talking about some of those stories. I got to be just the ear on the wall to hear some of the 85 Bears stories, and it was just.
So Dan Jiggets was my client.
Really?
He came out of Harvard in 1976.
Wow. Jigs gave me a watch long time ago. What massive watch. Guy was great, but great man. He's such
We've just lost all your younger listeners.
Bryce, I don't know. I'm looking at Juwan like, yo, I don't know half these people, but
Yeah, I
do
mean,
know
I heard the
85
name
Bears.
before, but I can't put the face to the name right now.
Right.
This
I'm
is 1976. Where were you, Juwan, in 1976?
Wasn't even conceived yet, man.
You weren't even close to being conceived.
I was a couple of years from coming on the scene, but I do remember. Yeah, those are just Bear legends. Again, growing up in Chicago, those are some names like that you just.
Well, I had Jim Harbaugh, who played quarterback for them.
Yeah.
I had Cordell Stewart, who played quarterback for them. When Sabertooth Tigers and woolly mammoths were still roaming the earth, I had a first-round draft pick named Ted Albrecht, who I think still does the Northwestern games.
Yes, I think that's correct. So great voice still to this day. So I know we want to be totally respectful of your time. I do have a question because I did tease it earlier, so I want to make sure I pay it off.
Well, hold on, I got one more. Let me get this in.
Jump in.
Does the Chiefs get their revenge this year against the Bucks?
I think so. I think that remember Patrick Mahomes is only in his fourth year of playing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know it's hard to believe, but he just gets better, and that team gets better. There will never be a time when you lose your two offensive tackles before the Super Bowl.
True.
And you have no protection. So he did the best he could, but the rush was on from the beginning.
Yes, it was. No, and Patrick Mahomes, just for the record, and Desmond can back me up on this. We were at a draft party in Chicago during that time, and I wanted Patrick Mahomes to be in Chicago. I really did. I was hoping he got. Just for the record, I just had to put it.
You got Justin Fields now.
Yeah,
I'm happy, but I'm saying I'd rather have Patrick Mahomes. Like, if I'm really going to be honest. So
well, remember they gave up draft picks to draft Trubisky.
Yeah, I know.
And they passed on Deshaun Watson too, but that's another story.
We're gonna skip past that story. All right. So again, respectful of Leigh's time, I do have a question about, of course, one of the things that I always tie Leigh back to is the movie Jerry Maguire. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I actually did a reenactment for a communication class of the Show Me the Money scene with a late teammate of mine from college. But Leigh, can you tell us how does it feel to have a movie loosely based off of your experience, and then really what the movie got right, and then what the movie got, kind of took some liberties with, to put it lightly. But what was that like during that time? And if you just walk us through that.
So I got a call from Cameron Crowe, who was a writer-director who had gone underground in a Southern California high school to write a movie called Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which I thought was hilarious. So he asked if he could follow me around to put together a film based on a sports agent. And so I said yes, and he came to the draft in '93 when Drew Bledsoe was my client, who was the first pick. And he came to the league meetings where I was walking free agents around. He came to a series of games with me. He came to pro scouting day at USC. He came to the Super Bowl. And while we were going through these experiences, I told him stories, lots and lots of stories. So then he went off and he wrote the script. And my job as technical advisor was to vet the script to make sure that nothing in it jarred you as a hardcore sports fan. You didn't think the dialogue was phony. You didn't think the look was wrong. And I was on the set for a number of the different scenes, making sure that it got right. And then he assigned me a young actor named Cuba Gooding Jr., who came down with me to Phoenix. And for a Super Bowl, I made him pretend he was a wide receiver. He had to hang out with Amani Toomer and Desmond Howard. And so I put him in role and worked with some of the actors that way. I actually had to show the quarterback in the film, Cush, who was played by Jerry O'Connell, how to throw a spiral because he had gone to NYU and they didn't have a football program. And so there's a lot of life up there on the screen. And now it's been 21 years. And virtually every time I go in an airport or you walk into a restaurant, someone runs up to the table and asks me to say or says those 4 words. Let's start with show.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
And
about.
end with money.
I wanted to jump in real quick and ask this. What made you start your Super Bowl parties?
So I thought that we needed a place to have our clients and their family have a good party to go to. And then we started building it into owners, general managers, coaches in the NFL. And then we added to that all the sports writers and electronic media that covered it. And then I tried to program something in popular culture. So when years ago, the big show was Joe Millionaire. It was the first reality show. We had Joe Millionaire. Or when Ruben won American Idol, we had Ruben. Or one year, Rob Schneider came dressed as the exercise guru, Richard Simmons. Only he was the bad Richard Simmons, and he ate ding-dongs, and he got drunk and smoked. And so that night on Jay Leno, they showed that to the real Richard Simmons. And then we started making it about charitable causes. So, for example, the year that Haiti experienced an earthquake, we sent a water machine that purified the water for 140,000 people there because they were dying of cholera because of infected water. And then it just grew and grew and grew. And I picked a venue that was evocative of the city itself. So we had it at Jazzland in New Orleans with big floats. And the last time the Super Bowl was in LA, we had it on the back lot of 20th Century Fox. It was the set of Old New York from the movie Hello, Dolly. Wow. And this year we're having it at Sony Studios, the old MGM. So we figured out that we could help kids with autism, that we could do Make-A-Wish, that we could help inner city kids, that we could use the party for productive purposes. We did a military component where we would live hook up with troops in the field in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it served a lot of different purposes. And one year we had the 2 chief housewives from the Real Housewives of Atlanta come. We had the cast of Any Given Sunday, which is another film I worked on, come. So it's become sort of institutionalized, and I have 5,000 of my closest friends there every year.
No, thank you for explaining that story, because we always hear about the parties and whatnot. So it's finally good to finally get the background of how it started and where it's at today.
We now give humanitarian awards. So we give it to an owner. We've done Clark Hunt of the Chiefs and Mark Davis of the Raiders, and a variety of different owners, Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins. And then we do a coach, a general manager, a player, and a retired player. And we give them an award for what they do off the field to make it better, because there's not enough focus on the good side of football and sports.
Excellent. That's great. And I'm glad that you're giving back and recognize that, because I think a lot of athletes, I think, negativity sells in a way, but I think that we need to show and put a spotlight on the good that's being done. I think that needs to be more positive put out, and especially now in today's day and age. So absolutely.
All right.
Well, Lee, that concludes our podcast and our semi rapid fire round. But we wanted to be respectful of your time, but we definitely appreciate you coming on. This is a silly question to ask, but for people that wants to follow your career or continue to know more about you, how can people go ahead and do so?
So our website is steinbergsports.com. I tweet at Leigh Steinberg. I Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the usual. Not TikTok, but
I don't think that. No.
But yeah, I'll leave that to you guys.
I don't have one either. I don't have one either. So
Thank you.
Not even messing with it.
Thank you, Juwan. I'm happy to hear that. And I'm one white man who can't dance and can't jump. And so I'm not going to embarrass myself on TikTok. But anyway, it's been a pleasure being with you all, and good luck on your show.